Hello, 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 hello. Hello to my subbies. I hope you guys can hear me perfectly. Okay? It's still considered Saturday night, even though I'm late. I'm late. I'm sorry. I'm late. Man, it was a long day. But it's all good. One thing, I keep my word and my promises are my promises, okay? We got date night. Date night is ours. This is week 3 for date night. We have been dating for officially 3 weeks. Subbies, if you didn't know, now you know. We go together forever. All right. Now I did pick us a great. Well, let me not say that because I ain't watched it yet. All right. So you know how I go with these movies, especially these short films. But I did find us a couple of new ones, which was great. I was like, oh, at least they got some new ones. So that's the good part. So that's what we're gonna do. The first one you watch with me. Let me pause it once it comes up. So make sure you got your snacks. Make sure you got your butt. Make sure you got your drinks already ready. Kids already asleep. Nobody should be able to bother you. We are finna get ready. What did I say? You can't wait till we go. Let me. You know what's the best part? You know what I'm gonna do? That's because these screens been up like probably all day. It's always best to refresh your shit. Like I said, make sure you got your snacks. And that's what took me a little longer. I had to make my snacks. I had to make me a salad. Shit. I'll do better. Don't want to go to sleep on a heavy belly. I just say we doing better. Sorry, y'all. Mhm. It's coming. I hope y'all had a great Saturday, though. Hope it was productive for you. I hope you accomplished anything, and if not all, something. Okay, and if you was here early, we had a good time. We hung out for a little while. We learned a little bit about some historic black rapper, female rappers, not just any rappers, black rappers. Yeah, I say it all the time because that's so you can know where you at in the compound. And I love you. It's a date. It's the 3rd week. You should know me by now. I'm a little bit ghetto. I'm a little bit country. I'm a little bit bougie. I'm a little bit a little dainty. Same time, a little hood rat. A beautiful person, beautiful soul. I'm only searching for my tribe. Everybody else, keep it moving. Here we go. I'm testing my speaker. Mm, here we go. All right now, don't do that shit to me again. Okay, here we go. What, baby? Oh, it's so pretty, ain't it? Thank you. I got that
Hello
food.
everyone. Back again with film
Oh,
recaps. In this video,
hey, hey. Okay. She got some new toys. Okay, sweetheart. Go back in there with that. Thank you. And sweet baby. I told her that 10 minutes ago. She just had to come and say, hey, mm, hurry up. Now, this movie is a poor wife is on, is cheated on, hit by her husband. She goes insane for revenge. That's all it's saying. Let me see. need special names for anything. Productions, Netflix studio. I don't know, but that's what we're gonna watch. And I am ready. Are you ready?
I'm going to recap one of the drama thriller films from 2022, titled Loving Adults. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline.
Um, so I didn't know it was
The
a
film opens
recap.
with a woman called
Recap.
Leonora,
But
who
hey, we
enjoys
here. We're
running as
gonna
a
watch it
hobby,
now.
going for a run, while the narrator tells us about how most murders are about love, and almost never random. At the same time, a man is waiting in a van, who is none other than the woman's husband, Christian. Upon seeing her pass, his hatred for her prompts him to accelerate his vehicle, and he decides to run her over. We are then shown the narrator, an old detective who is telling this story to his daughter over lunch. Based on their conversation, the detective is convinced that Christian is guilty, and is still unable to stop thinking about the case. He resumes telling the story, and we are taken to the past, to be exact 3 days before the murder. That night, Christian and Leonora are woken up by Christian's phone that keeps vibrating at 3 a.m. Annoyed, Leonora demands to see who's been calling him, but Christian refuses. This raises her suspicion that Christian might be having an affair, so she proceeds to try and take the phone away from him. The detective then fills us in on their background. Christian is a co-founder of a construction company. He built the company with his friend, Peter, while his wife Leonora was an accomplished violinist, who had to give up on her career to take care of their sick son, Johann. The next morning after their fight, Leonora apologizes to her husband for lashing out, and he shrugs it off and tells her that it's fine. She then proceeds to take their son to school, while Christian heads off to work. At work, he can be seen flirtatiously eyeing one of his workers, Xenia, and later they meet in a private area of the construction site. As it turns out, she is the one who sent the message last night. Xenia then gives him the ultimatum to choose between her or his wife, which gets Christian conflicted because although he loves Xenia very much, his son Johann has been getting better and he would like to be a good father to him. Hearing this angers Xenia, and she storms off with disappointment. When Leonora gets home, she decides to look through Christian's Facebook, while on call with a phone company and attempt to retrieve the messages on Christian's now broken phone, but the company rejects her request. She ends up seeing a picture of Christian and Xenia smiling fondly at each other, and that seems to be enough for her to feel like there is something between them. To further confirm her suspicion, Christian seems entirely disinterested in being intimate with her when he comes home from work that day. Despite the tension, the couple leave to attend Christian's work event that night, and during it Leonora's jealousy grows all the more, as Christian gives Xenia a lengthy compliment for her astounding work. Later on, when everyone is celebrating, Leonora catches Xenia and her husband climbing upstairs, so she proceeds to follow them. But to her surprise, this leads her to the shocking sight of the two having sex with each other. Even worse, Xenia is smiling at her when she catches her watching, while Christian is oblivious to his wife's presence. That next morning, Christian gathers the courage to sit down with his wife, and finally tell her that he doesn't want to be married anymore. Unwilling to stay silent any longer, Leonora finally tells Christian she saw what he was doing yesterday at the office. And this is where the plot thickens. Leonora starts to get infuriated, because she agreed to give up on her career for the past 20 years to take care of their sick son, which means that if they get divorced, she would have nothing. She then begins threatening to report Christian to the police, because as it turns out, Christian committed fraud in his business to make a fortune. Plus, he could profit more from this crime, which is why Leonora was forced to give up her career. Afraid he will go to prison, Christian tries to offer his wife some money, but she refuses, stating that it's not about money, it's about the deal they've made for their family. Now that Christian is planning something, he goes to track down Leonora's former best friend, Cassandra. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to him, Leonora has decided to follow him. Christian and Cassandra end up sitting down to have a chat, during which he tells her that he's planning to divorce Leonora. Hearing this, Cassandra simply warns him that when she was young, Leonora used to have a boyfriend named Mike, who died from falling off a cliff. According to the town rumors, the boyfriend was planning to break up with her, and was already seeing someone else at the time, which surged the rumor that Leonora pushed him
And
to
then
his
he
death.
died.
Seeing the potential to blackmail Leonora back, Christian decides to track down the girl Mike was cheating on Leonora with at the time. He visits the spot Mike the boyfriend fell from, and shared a phone call with Sonia, the woman who Mike cheated on Leonora with. Apparently, they were camping out in the woods at the time, and snuck away to make love. According to Sonia, she felt as if she was being watched the whole time, and when Mike went away for a smoke, moments later she heard him scream. Just then they suddenly found him at the bottom of the
Push that
cliff.
nigga.
To add, Cassandra was certain she saw Leonora at the site. What makes it even creepier, while Mike stays on call, we can see Leonora lurking nearby. Back to the detective, he added that when people in town were questioned for Mike's murder, Leonora's music teacher swore that she was at violin practice the whole time this went down. When Christian gets home after, Leonora tells him to leave, but he is reluctant because he fears that she will call the police. Christian then tries to blackmail her, by saying how the folks at Leonora's hometown believe she killed her boyfriend Mike. Hearing this, Leonora is upset but simply brushes it off, since no one has any evidence to support the claim. She goes on to tell him that the only way she won't go to the police is if he stays with her, and even forcefully dials Xenia's number on his phone, pressuring him to break up with her, but he couldn't because he loves her. With nothing left to argue about, she begins to roughly shove him, and kicks him out of the house, claiming that both the house and their son are hers. All animals, according to the detective, will attack if they are cornered or have no other choice, which is what Christian does. He comes up with a plan, in which he goes to his office, and swaps his car with one of the white vans. At the same time, Leonora is doing her routine, jogging around while it is slowly raining. Meanwhile, Christian finds a spot behind the trees, by the path Leonora passes through during her evening jog. As soon as he sees his wife passing around, he starts accelerating and runs her over.
Oh, that was his ass.
When he notices that she is still moving, he shows no mercy and drives backwards, running her over once more. He then leaves the spot, and silently sneaking his way into the office to make it seem like he's been working this whole time. When he gets home, he avoids looking at his son, and cries in the shower out of guilt. After everything that's happened, Christian has a drink to relax and unwind. But all of a sudden, well, of course, Christian is shocked and speechless when he sees Leonora returning home. The wife casually asks him if he's decided to leave his mistress, and announces how pleasant it was to take a new jogging route for today. As his wife walks away, he stands in horror with the realization that he must have hit the wrong person earlier. That night, Leonora asks him if he came back because he still wants her, to which he says yes, although we know that he's obviously lying. That next morning when they're about head out, their neighbor shows up to announce that a lady was killed in a hit and run last night, along the track that Leonora usually passes through during her daily run, which shocks her. After that, Leonora goes to the hit and run scene, where she learns that the woman who was hit is a mother of 3. A few days later, a graduation party is held at their house, when all of a sudden the detective shows up to interview Christian in case he saw or heard anything out of the ordinary that night. Christian says that he was working extra hours at the office during the incident, and they quickly leave after they're satisfied with the answer. Shortly after, he stares at Xenia's text that he hasn't replied, and looking very uncomfortable at the grad party. He goes to visit the place where he ran over the woman, and read the writings left by her children on a makeshift shrine. Riddled with
This is
guilt, he goes to the
horrible.
police to turn himself in, but are instead told to sit and wait. During this time, he gets a text from his son, and gets reminded that he doesn't want to disappoint him. At the same time, he sees a news report announcing that the police thinks whoever is behind the hit and run might have fled the country already, and so he changes his mind and goes home. But it's not over. Leonora eventually grows suspicious after discovering that her car wash card has run out of balance all of a sudden. After asking the clerk about it, she obtained a security footage detailing the exact time and date her card was used to make a transaction, which she ends up presenting to her husband later that day. The security footage shows Christian attempting to wash the white van he used to hit the woman. As a result, this leads Leonora to believe that her husband attempted to kill her but failed to. Seeing the guilt on Christian's face concludes her fear. She makes a call to the police in an attempt to turn her husband in, but Christian takes her phone away. To defuse the situation, he makes up a story that they decided to call, because they recently saw a truck with a foreign plate in the area recently. He then goes after Leonora, and hands her phone while begging for her to stay, but she simply drives away out of fear. The husband starts to feel nervous and lose hope, and some time later, the detective pulls up at their house. Before he meets the detective, he gives his son an embrace and tells him he loves him. But unexpectedly, the police are not here to arrest him. They are here to ask more about the foreign plate he reported on the phone. Christian spends the entire interaction looking nervous, which raises the detective's suspicion, but he doesn't have the evidence to arrest him. He also gets a text message from Leonora asking to meet him for dinner. When they sit face to face again, she expresses to him that she could never possibly report him to the police, because all she cares about is their son, and how his life would be ruined if Christian went to prison. But at the same time, she has lost her trust in Christian, and for him to win it back, she would like him to murder Xenia, because as long as the mistress lives, she will always serve as a liability to their marriage. She then proceeds to lewdly convince Christian that all he needs is a strong alibi, just like the one she had when she murdered her boyfriend, Mike. Well, it is at this point that she begins to reveal everything about the rumor, including how she snuck into the woods and watched Mike making love with Cassandra, before pushing him off the cliff when he's alone.
Ooh.
Afterwards, she made a run back to the school, and entered the music room through the window, wherein a turntable had been playing a violin track the whole time. She immediately pretended that she's been playing the violin, when the music teacher came to check on her shortly after.
Oh,
And that's how she
that was
completely
tough.
dispels any suspicion that she committed the murder. And so, the two decide to stay at a hotel for vacation as an
Oh,
alibi, while in reality Christian is tasked to murder Xenia and make it seem like a robbery. He
whoa.
climbs down the balcony when no one's watching, and pays a visit to Xenia's house, but she turns him away because he's been ghosting her. Christian remains adamant. He breaks through her door, and holds her while saying that he loves her more than he's ever loved anyone. At the same time, his wife is at the hotel, making a call to room service, while deliberately making casual mentions that her husband's in the shower. To add the final touch, she uses Christian's phone to text Xenia with a message saying that Christian is leaving Xenia, because he cares more about his wife and kids. Back to Christian, he immediately goes to distract Xenia when the text message arrives, because he knows what's in it. He instead kisses her, and gets her away from her phone. At the same time, Leonora takes an extra notch to her efforts. When the waiter shows up with their food, she goes to the bathroom, and plays a voice recording of Christian's voice to make it seem like they're having a conversation. But unbeknownst to her, instead of killing Xenia, Christian ends up spending an intimate night with her. Much later that night, Xenia goes to the bathroom to clean up, right when she notices that the window is open. And a moment later, Leonora is already behind her, and proceeds to stab her in the gut. Since Xenia is taking forever, Christian goes after her,
It's a bad
but
bitch.
instead finds a
She
bloody
knew this nigga
Leonora
could not
standing
do
over
it.
Xenia's dead body. A few days later, the police are summoned to Xenia's house, because the neighbors have reported her missing. They soon discover that all of Xenia's electronic devices are missing. But oddly enough, there isn't a dead body in sight. The bed sheets are free of any DNA and fingerprints. Furthermore, the police managed to retrieve the latest text message on her phone, which is sent by Christian's phone and states that Christian would like to end their affair. This leads the police to the couple's house to interview them, but the detective is still not satisfied with the results, and is convinced something is amiss. He sends a team of hounds to search through the woods near their house for any dead body, while Christian and Leonora are seen celebrating a house party at the same time. Leonora then quickly sends the nervous-looking Christian to light up the bonfire in the middle of the lake, and we
The
can see the police
motherfucking
hounds walking out of the
housewife.
woods. But
Ooh.
then, the police hounds suddenly start barking near the lake, while Christian hastily pours gasoline over the bonfire, and tries to light it.
Hey, girl.
Despite his efforts, he cannot get the matches to burn, and eventually there are only
Ain't
2
this bitch
matchsticks left.
crazy?
After some time, The bonfire
Find
finally
the
lights
Cora.
up.
Shout out to the Cora for
The
being at the
dogs
Soil
stop barking,
Compound.
and
Date
Christian
night.
safely
It's
retreats to his
subby
family,
movie
while the
time.
detective simply walks
It's
away.
our date night.
Upon
Hey.
seeing a lady with a binocular, Christian walks up to her and asks to try it. He then uses the binocular to look at Xenia's body, which has been placed inside the bonfire. Afterwards, the family decides to sell their house and move away, and we later find Christian walking around with a bag near the
Is you
lake.
hollering?
We
Because I
now
really
return
want
to
to
the
go. Ah!
detective, who is finally finished telling the story to his daughter. It appears that Christian was never convicted for the murder due to the lack of evidence, but the detective is convinced that he's guilty. The film ends with a shot of Xenia's bones at the bottom of the river. Okay guys. That's all the recap of Loving
God
Adults
damn.
2022. Thanks for
Woo!
watching. See you again in the next video.
Whoa! That was a bad bitch. That was a bad bitch. I knew it. I pushed the wrong one. So it ended up being a recap that I really wanted to catch because I'm the type of person like I don't want to watch none I'm not interested in. Oh, he got the Jeffrey Dahmer. Come on, let's watch it real fast. It's only 15 minutes. Shit. See, I had a real one. Now, see, he be getting me
Hello
on
everyone.
him. Listen,
Back
listen.
again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of a drama horror films from 2017, titled My Friend Dahmer. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day.
I'll go
Without
back.
further ado, let's get straight to the storyline.
Just listen. I just like him to tell me the stories. I'll be just like, what
This
the fuck?
movie is based on a true story of the infamous American serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer. Between the years of 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 men and boys in truly horrific fashion. Rape, dismemberment, necrophilia, and cannibalism were all parts of his modus operandi. In this film, we get to see Jeff Dahmer in his senior year of high school, back when he was an awkward loner growing up in the 80s, before he became the psychotic killer he is known for. As the movie starts, we see a young man, none other than Dahmer, sitting alone on the school bus. He then notices a grown man on a jog, and is overly fascinated by the man that he gets up from his seat just to watch him. Here we can see again that
What?
Dahmer develops an obsession with the male jogger, as he keeps watching the man
He said he was overly. He just jumped up to watch him. I was like, oh hell no.
even after the bus drops him off. Afterwards, Dahmer is seen carrying a plastic bag, and when he stumbles upon a couple of neighborhood teens, he explains that he's carrying a dead cat he found and is going to try and dissolve it in acid, which he has access to because his father is a chemist. Curious, the two teen boys follow Dahmer to his father's shed, and watch as he dissolves the cat, while explaining that the process will take a month because the acid is weak. He enjoys doing this simply because he loves bones and is interested in what's inside the body. However, the two teen boys are skeptical and think that Dahmer is simply pouring water into the jar instead of acid, so he tries to show them another roadkill, which he dissolved a while ago, and crudely breaks the jar to prove how serious he is. The two teen boys find themselves disgusted by the foul stench, and weirded out by Dahmer, so they call him a freak and leave. We then follow Dahmer as he goes through his daily life. Dahmer's family life
Now what that backwards? Y'all thought he was lying.
looks nothing out of the ordinary. He has a caring father who constantly bickers with his mother, and a loud younger brother. During the dinner, it
This is
becomes clear that
crazy.
his father wishes for him to become more social. At school, his classmates think he's weird and some even bully him, except for one similarly awkward boy, who he sits next to at lunch and asks him to go to see a concert together. But aside from that, he sits alone in biology class, and seems fascinated by a preserved animal inside a jar in the lab. When Dahmer gets home, we see that he creepily has stolen the preserved animal to keep to himself. But contrastingly, when he gets inside the house, he sees that his parents are arguing once more and don't care that their sons are listening, so he tenderly guides his little brother away to keep from having to listen. One day after the school
We
band
gotta watch
practice,
this,
Dahmer
Cora.
finds
We
his only
might have to
friend
watch
getting
this
harassed by
together.
the school jocks, but simply stands idle and opts to walk away, even though the friend tries to talk to him and get him to come help. That very day, his dad comes home early from work, and becomes infuriated when he realizes that Dahmer has made no progress in making friends, and instead prefers to toy with his preserved animals in the shed as he always does. And so, the dad storms into his shed, and begins throwing his preserved animals into the trash can. while scolding him to try and be more normal and stop all this. From now on, the father will shut the shed and take it down.
See, they didn't used to
After
take it
the
serious. He
intervention,
should have
Dahmer
had got
tries to
help.
stay on school grounds on the next day, and is suddenly approached by a drug dealer classmate, Fig, but it doesn't take long before he loses interest, and decides to walk home instead. At some point, he waits by the side of the road, while staring at his bone collection in deep thought. Until the jogger from the beginning of the movie passes by, and catches his interest yet again. When he's back home later that day, his father apologizes for being harsh, and explains that he doesn't want Dahmer to end up like him, who spends too much time in labs and doesn't have many friends. The father tries to make it up by presenting him with a pair of dumbbells, hoping that Dahmer might get into working out, and hopefully snatch a pretty girl someday. To satisfy his father, he begins working out, but still secretly spends his days out in the woods, trapping critters in hopes of collecting their bones. One day in class, a history teacher tries asking him a question, but Jeff, who is too lazy to answer, decides to speak to the teacher with a silly voice, which surprisingly gets the entire class to laugh.
I don't know.
He then sees this as an opportunity to make friends, so when he's walking down the hallway later, he starts making weird noises and doing random gestures. He even pretends to have a seizure to get everyone to laugh, and it actually works. Until the bell rings and everyone heads to class, leaving him alone. This eventually becomes a thing he's known for, and one day a group of teenage boys who think he's hilarious decide to ask him to sit at their table for lunch. They are Durf, Mike, and Neil. It is revealed that Jeffrey imitated the speech and gestures of his mother's interior decorator, who has some kind of disorder. Jeffrey inspires Durf to draw him in various situations, and it is here that Durf and his friends form the Dahmer fan club. The four of them surprisingly get along so well, that they'd like to come up with epic pranks to liven up their senior year. They start with getting Dahmer to make random noises in the library, and have the librarian blame someone else for it. They also run down the hallway while pretending to have seizures together. However, in between Dahmer's seemingly improving social life,
Everybody
one day
crazy.
he discovers that his mother, who was a former drug addict, is having a relapse. He tries to convince her to stop and go to the doctor, but to no avail. Despite it all, he goes on with his days, and one day a weird instance happens when he's out fishing with a couple of his friends. After hooking a fish, his friends asks him to let the poor fish go. Dahmer, however, opts to violently gut the fish instead, claiming that he's curious what its insides looks like. His friends of course find this disturbing, but still don't register this as a red flag. One of his friends,
He couldn't even
Neil,
help it.
is the photographer for the school's yearbook, and so as their next prank, Dahmer comes up with the idea to put himself in every school club's yearbook picture, which his friends happily agree to. The following day, they start to carry out their plan, and in the end, the boys manage to perfectly pull off this prank. Afterwards, Dahmer comes home bringing his friend Durf, to excitedly announce to his dad that he's joined a lot of clubs this year, but his dad is too occupied arguing with his mom to notice. The fight eventually makes Durf feel awkward, so he excuses himself and goes home. In secret, Dahmer makes it a habit to hide behind the trees just to wait for the jogger to pass, seemingly having grown a crush on the grown man. Until one day, it just so happens that the three of them are hanging out, right when the jogger arrives and is greeted by Mike. As it turns out, he is Mike's family doctor, whose name is Dr. Matthews. We can see that young Dahmer appears flustered throughout this interaction, but his two friends don't seem to notice. When Dahmer comes home, he finds his parents fighting again, this time over his mother impulse buying a car. The frustrated dad takes a bottle of liquor to calm himself down, which Dahmer sneakily steals, and that's when he starts drinking. On the next day, Dahmer and his friends are casually talking in school, when their drug dealer classmate Fig suddenly walks up to them, to show off the fact that his former Nazi father just gave him a pocket knife. He then cuts himself with it and begins sucking his own blood, which weirded out the three boys, but not Dahmer. As time goes on, Dahmer eventually becomes sort of an alcoholic, and comes to school reeking of alcohol, to the concern of Durf. He also still secretly goes around collecting road kills, and dissects them after. One day, he goes on an overnight school trip to Washington, D.C., during which he gets roomed with
No.
Charlie, the only black person in his class. Here
Of
Dahmer discreetly
course.
checks him out, and suddenly begins to ask him a disturbing question, which is whether a black person's internal organs are the same color as a white person's. Charlie, who is weirded out but is probably used to racist questions, decides to ignore him. When the boys are walking down the streets of DC on the next day, they joke about getting an interview with the vice president for their school newspaper, which Dahmer takes seriously. Taking everyone by surprise, he reaches for the nearest payphone and makes a call to the White House, and somehow, they manage to get an interview with the vice president himself. They enter the White House and have a brief audience with the man, who gives them superficial questions about what they want to be when they grow up, to which Dahmer simply answers biology.
Great, you ought to pursue that.
When they get home, Durf expresses how impressed he is with Dahmer before they part ways, but Dahmer's euphoria from the trip doesn't last long, because as soon as he gets into the car, his dad breaks the news that he and Dahmer's mother are on the verge of divorce, and that his dad has decided to live in a motel for the time being. Hearing this crushes Dahmer, and we can see him lie awake in his bed later that night. To add to his dilemma is his growing crush towards Dr. Matthews. Therefore, Dahmer fakes a cold so that he can get an appointment with him, and he can examine Dahmer naked. Dr. Matthews becomes
That be me
uncomfortable
falling
during the
out.
hernia exam, when he notices that Jeffrey has an erection. This of course makes the situation awkward, and sends young Dahmer on a spiral. He is now becoming hyper aware of his sexuality, and finds himself completely silent when his friends are talking about girls. Even his friends eventually pick up on how odd and distant he's been, and Dahmer begins drinking at school as well. It is finally the day where the yearbook photos get printed, every single one of which has Dahmer in it. But unfortunately, a teacher walks in on the three boys laughing at the pictures, and realize what they're up to, so she starts crossing out Dahmer's face on every single one of them, which completely ruins their plan. Meanwhile, Dahmer is drowning in both his parents' impending divorce as well as his sexual awakening. He is also visibly disturbed when the family pays his father a visit at the motel, and his parents end up arguing in the parking lot over custody. So when he gets home right after, he locks himself in his room, and lays in his bed, cuddling Dr. Matthews' dead body. But luckily, it is only his imagination.
Oh, shit.
On the other side of the town, Dahmer's friends are out at a party, where a couple of their classmates tease them for not hanging out with Dahmer lately, which is a shame because Dahmer makes them more interesting. Feeling challenged, Durf bets that he could get Dahmer to do a fake seizure attraction at the mall this weekend, an idea which Neil isn't too happy about, because he feels like they're treating Dahmer like a zoo attraction. Still, Durf goes on with his plan, and bribes Dahmer with some money to get him to say yes. And so that weekend, a very drunk-looking Dahmer sits in the backseat of Durf's car as they drive up to the mall. Once they arrive, Dahmer goes on and performs his seizure act, while his school friends watch and laugh. One of them is even there to record the entire thing, as Dahmer proceeds to publicly humiliate himself for their entertainment. This goes on for a while, until Dahmer appears to have grown visibly tired of this, and rejoins his friends with a sullen look, as he's come to realize that he's just a spectacle to these teen boys. As if that's not enough, when he comes home, he gets informed by his mother that his parents have finalized the divorce, and the dad is getting the house. On the next day, the increasingly unstable Dahmer arms himself with a baseball bat, and waits for Dr. Matthews to pass, but he never does.
Thank
This
goodness.
prompts him to lose his patience, and starts beating the bat against a tree until it breaks. That same day, a couple of neighborhood kids discover a disemboweled animal remains, which becomes the talk of the school on the next day, because people find it creepy how someone would do that. Dahmer's friends then start talking about prom, and Mike makes fun of Dahmer by saying there's no way any girl would want to go to prom with him. This offends Dahmer, so he goes right ahead and asks a freshman named Bridget to prom. At first, she says no because she knows Dahmer always does weird things, but eventually warms up to the idea after Dahmer convinces her that going to the dance with a senior is cool. And so they end up awkwardly going together, to the surprise of Dahmer's friends. At some point during the night, Neil, who
He
was
showed
against
them.
making fun of Dahmer at the mall, decides to walk up to him, and apologize for what happened, which Dahmer accepts. When it is time to dance with his date, we can see that he grows uncomfortable, because he was never attracted to women to begin with. And so, he excuses himself, and retreats to his car, preferring to be alone. On the next day when he comes home from school, he finds his mother stuffing her things inside the car, and taking his brother with her to live with her relatives. This breaks Dahmer's heart, because this means his mother and brother won't be attending his graduation. He doesn't react at all when his mother talks to him, and after they leave, he breaks down, and cries inside the house.
I hate how they trying to.
On his graduation day,
give
Dahmer
him a
doesn't
little
seem excited at
sympathy
all,
though
and
too
here
at
the
the same
father
time.
congratulates him and hands him the keys to the family car, without knowing Dahmer's mother has left him completely alone. A few days after, Durf finds Dahmer walking alone by the side of the road, and decides to give him a ride home. When they arrive, he notices how there's blood on Dahmer's fingers, but Dahmer tells him that it's just paint. They then have an awkward conversation about their friendship, during which Durf basically refuses to apologize for treating Dahmer like a zoo attraction. Aggrieved, Dahmer sneakily invites Durf to come inside for a beer. Once they're inside the empty house, Durf gets creeped out by how close Dahmer is standing, so he begins walking away, saying his mother is waiting for him. We watch in horror as Dahmer grabs a baseball bat, and is about to strike him with it. But fortunately for Durf, Dahmer lets him leave. And as Durf gets in the car, he notices the bat. Once
Ooh.
Dahmer is alone, he finds himself freaking out over the thoughts that came over him earlier. On the next morning, Dahmer gets inside Volkswagen Beetle given by his dad, and drives around. Shortly after, he stops by to pick up a good-looking hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks from a concert, who will soon end up as his first murder victim. The film ends with a closing credits note that Hicks was invited to visit Dahmer's house, but was never seen again after that day, and Jeffrey Dahmer was finally arrested in 1991. Okay guys. That's all the recap of My Friend Dahmer 2017. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next.
All right. God damn. Even just the recap is stressful as hell. Woo. I hope you enjoyed it. Even though it was a recap, it was a good recap. And that first movie, I'll have to get it for you. I'll remember. I promise I'll remember to maybe I'll write it in the title later today for you. Or I'll put it in a hashtag. Okay. But thank you. Thank you for coming to date night. Thank you for just sitting up with me, watching movies. It's fun. It's us. Once we get more of us here, we'll discuss it afterwards and talk about what it's about and all that good stuff. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it. And everything that we do now will get better, will grow, will mean a lot more. I hope to find you guys liking and subscribing soon. If nothing, viewing the video. So nice to see you. If you're new, nice to meet you. If you're a regular, I love you. My subbies mean the best and the most to me. I'm Story Laurent. This is the Celeb Compound. This is Saturday Date Night. I'll see you next week, sweets. Till next time.